Some of the best home tours we published in my time at El Decor and previously when I was at Curb, all of those homes felt incredibly personal. You could tell that a real person inhabited that space, that if they worked with a designer, because not all of the homes we publish in El Decor even are professionally decorated, but if that person commissioned an interior designer to work with them, there was real conversation about not just what they wanted in the house, but how they lived, how it needed to function. At Curbed, I remember really vividly, it was a studio apartment in Williamsburg by a software engineer at Vox Media. She decorated it herself. She and her partner lived there together. And it wasn't extravagant by far. I mean, it was a small space, but it wasn't even extravagantly furnished. It wasn't like she had found like the highest quality antiques to fill this space. It really was things that she loved. She had this giant dining table in the space, probably too big for the space. And I think she said that in our interview with her. It was too big in that the space was so small and the dining table kind of domineered the space in this way that you wouldn't necessarily assume would be something she wanted to live with. But she loved having people over. And if it was just her 5 friends and she and her partner in that space on this dining table with an Yves Klein blue linoleum top, then that's what the room was going to be. Just that idea of really making a space do what you need and fulfill you emotionally in the way that you need was really great. A room stands out to me when there is something off kilter and maybe a bit strange and even garish in it. Like, it's great when somebody has a very specific vision for their space or designer has a very specific vision for their client space and everything has a kind of consistency and uniformity. That is a real skill. But I love, as an editor and as a person who's obsessed with design, when I see something in a room and I'm like, why does that work? That shouldn't work, but it works. That kind of strange vinyl upholstery on a dining chair in the corner in a lurid orange really should not work. But it's working because the rest of the room is so graceful. And so you need a mole on this face, right? You need that thing that hints at a bit of a playfulness or an intelligence or an oddity of the person who lives in the space. And I love that. That makes a room stand out to me 10 times out of 10. I tend to know if a design aesthetic feels new or special if I feel genuine surprise when I see it. I see a lot of amazing things, and I see a lot of things that are remixes of reference points from previous design eras or design schools. And when I see something and I'm like, that is new, and that happens so rarely that I see something that is a genuine surprise visually, that's how I know that it's truly new. And again, that's really rare. And so I love when I have that sensation and I love when that happens. And then I cherish those moments because they keep me just interested in what the next thing could be around the corner tomorrow. But I also have a lot of respect for riffs on things that we think we know really well. I think the 70s have come back real strong in interior design over the last 5 years. And just when I thought I was maybe over thinking about the 1970s, everybody whose work I really love is using bronzed mirror glass. So like mirrored glass on both a ceiling and a wall, but it's all in a bronze tint rather than like a clear glass. And that's so 70s, but I hadn't been seeing a lot of it until the last like 2 years. And that to me is just a really nice way to use a reference point in a way that feels fresh, even if it's not brand new. You know, it's new to us because of this new use. There are a few design books that feel like classics to me, as the images are incredible. But there are 3. The first is Ada Louise Huxtable's Kicked a Building Lately, which is maybe the best title ever for a compendium of works of criticism about architecture. Ada Louise Huxtable was pioneering architecture critic at the New York Times who really made that position a position, and so much architectural criticism that we expect, and by we I mean people who are studying architecture or thinking about architectural criticism, was really founded on the kind of precedent that she set at the Times. There's also a great book called Illustrated History of Interior Design by Mario Praz. And that book is a feast, like a visual feast. I mentioned to someone 2 or 3 years ago that I loved that book, and they bought a copy, and maybe a month later I got a note and they were like, that book lives on my coffee table, and every time someone comes into the apartment, they're like, what is this book? Because it is just full of the most incredible photographs of interiors, a lot of very richly ornamented and heavily decorated interiors. And it's just a joy to flip through. And then I love the writing of Herbert Muchamp, who was also an architecture critic at the New York Times for a time. And there's a book of essays called Hearts of the City. And it's actually works of his from the New York Times, Art Forum, and a couple of other newspapers. He was, I think, a controversial figure in his time. People were like, oh, he's kind of on a flight of fancy about some of these things, a lot of purple prose in his writing. But at the core, he and Ada Louise Huxtable were really invested in how buildings functioned for people. Yes, how they function as objects in an urban landscape, but also how they function for people and how they function as good neighbors in a city. That type of writing about architecture has really informed how I think about how rooms are assembled and how people live in their interiors too. So I love those three books if people are looking for design books to read.